today's lesson, we're going to learn about evaluating expressions. There are two steps when you evaluate expressions, and they are as follows. First, you're going to be given a value for your variable, and you want to make sure you plug that given value into the correct variable because sometimes we'll have more than one variable that we are plugging these values into. So you want to make sure you're plugging it into the correct one. Step number two is from there, once you plugged in those correct variables, you'll have all these numbers to solve for by using the order of operations. Remember that is our PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, then you'll do multiplication and division left to right, then you will do addition and subtraction left to right. It is important that when we're plugging in these values, you want to use parentheses in order to avoid making sign mistakes. That is going to get used, so make sure to not let it by using those parentheses. Let's look at example number 1. We have 3z plus 2 times the quantity of z minus 1. So we'll go ahead and plug in for z anytime you have it 5 because that's when we're given z equals 5 there, so we plug it into z each time. Every time you plug that in, make sure to use parentheses. So z parentheses 5, that also helps us know it's not a 35, it's a 3 times 5, plus 2, open parentheses, then we have 5 again, minus 1. Now we go to our order of operations, step number 2. Always, always, always want to solve and get one number inside my parentheses first. So I subtract 1 from that 5. 3 times 5 I will keep. I did nothing with that yet, but I transitioned 5 minus 1 to a 4 now. From here, going left to right, we'll do multiplication. So the first multiplication I have is 3 times 5. That will be 15. Then I'll bring down the addition of 2 times 4. I'll do the multiplication of 2 times 4 next to become 8. And then I will add the 2 because that is the only operation left. 15 plus 8 will give me 23. In the next example, I have 4 minus 2 times b squared plus 3 times c, and I'm going to evaluate that when b is equal to a negative 2 and c is equal to a negative 1. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and plug those variables into the correct position. So 4 minus 2, then I'll put parentheses around my negative 2, 4b, which I will have to square, so don't forget about that, plus 3 times my negative 1. Again, putting those in parentheses. The first thing we have to do first, we have one number in the parentheses, so we'll skip to our exponents. Exponents here is going to be doing this negative 2 squared first. Remember, when I square a negative number, it is multiplying by itself. So negative 2 times negative 2 would give me a positive 4. Two negatives make a positive. Positive 4 will be rewritten there instead of negative 2 squared, and I complete and write everything around it. From here, do your multiplication left to right. So the first multiplication I have on the left is negative 2 times 4. Negative 2 times 4 here is going to be a negative 8. And then bring everything else down. The 4 in front of it and the plus 3 times 1 after it. Now the only multiplication I have left is 3 times negative 1, which will become a negative 3. Write everything else in front of it just as is because we did not do anything with those numbers yet. Now we go left to right with addition and subtraction here. So I do the 4 minus 8 first, which gives me a negative 4. Bring down the negative 3. Negative 4 minus 3 is going to give me negative 7 as my final answer there. In the next example, we have 6 plus x divided by 3 times y. So again, replacing x with a 15 and y with 2. So I keep the 6 plus Then I put parentheses around my 15 for x being replaced. Can't forget to divide that with a 3, then a parentheses 2. From here, I have no simplification needed inside my parentheses and no exponents, so I go to multiplication and division, must do that left to right. So left to right, the first thing that comes up is this division. So 15 divided by 3 becomes 5. Keep the parentheses 2 and the plus 6 in front of that. And then multiplication next of 5 times 2 becoming 10 plus my 6 here. From here, the only thing left between those two numbers is addition. So I'll go ahead and add 6 plus 10, giving me 16. In the next example, we have 4 times the quantity of -1 plus a, and we square that whole quantity, and then we subtract it by 3 times a squared. A here is going to be -3, and every time I replace it, I make sure to put parentheses around it. So 4 times the quantity of -1 plus a, which is going to be -3 in the parentheses. And then I'm squaring the whole thing, not just that -3, but my whole parentheses. Then I subtract it by 3 times a, which is now going to be replaced with -3, and I square it at the end. Now that -3 squared will apply to just that -3 here. But here the squared applies to the whole parentheses. Let's go ahead and simplify what's inside my parentheses first here. Want one number inside parentheses, and then I'll move to exponents. So I have a 4 in front of the parentheses. Inside my parentheses, that -1 plus a -3 becomes a -4. That is now one number inside. I cannot forget the squared that was outside of it. Then I subtract 3 times my -3 squared. Now I will do my exponents here. So I go ahead and have my exponents. 4 will now be multiplied by a -4 squared. So remember, -4 times -4 would come out to be a positive 16 here, minus that -3 times -3 squared, which then I will do the next exponent. So I go ahead and do my next exponent. I'll keep the 4 times 16 as is, but the -3 will now be multiplied by a 9 here. Because again, -3 squared is just multiplying -3 by itself. -3 times -3, two negatives make a positive. 3 times 3 is 9. From here, left to right with our multiplication. So I will multiply 4 times 16 first, which is 64. I'll keep the subtraction of 3 times 9. And then I will go ahead and multiply that -3 times 9 to be a -27. From here, I go ahead and subtract the 2. 64 minus 27 is going to give me my answer of 37. That's going to be my final answer here for this problem. Next example, we have 4m plus n minus p cubed. We go ahead and have three variables here, so make sure to plug them into the right position. M goes into the place of m, n goes into the place of n, and p goes into the place of p there. Let's go ahead and do that. So we have a 4, parentheses -2. Because I'm replacing the variable, I put parentheses around it, plus parentheses 5 minus a parentheses of 4 that I cannot forget needs to be cubed. Since I have one number in each of my parentheses, I now go to my next operation of exponents. So this exponent here, I will do first. And I'm just doing the 4 to the third. The negative is not inside the parentheses, so I will not apply it to the third power there. I rewrite everything else. 4 times negative 2 plus 5. I drop the parentheses around the 5 because there's nothing in front of it multiplied, just a positive number. So I'll drop the parentheses. It's just a plus 5. I'll keep the subtraction, but what changes for 4 cubed is thinking about 4 times 4 times 4. Well, when I do that multiplication out, I get my answer to be 64. Keep the minus, the subtraction in front of it. It was just 4 cubed that we did, which is a positive 64. From here, you go left to right with multiplication. Well, there's only one multiplication. It's 4 times negative 2, which is negative 8. Then I will keep everything else as is, the plus 5 and the minus 64. From here again, think about going left to right with my addition and subtraction. So the first thing left to right is negative 8 plus 5, a negative 3. Bring down the negative 64. Now I will combine negative 3 minus a 64, giving me negative 67 as my answer there. In the next example, F here, we have P minus 9 that started in the parentheses. Then we subtract yet another parentheses of the sum of M plus Q, and that is our ending parentheses at the end. From here, we're going to evaluate it when M is 4, P is 5, and Q is 3. So let's highlight where those are. M is going to be replaced with a 4. P, every time I have it, is going to be replaced with a 5. And Q, every time I have it, is going to be replaced with a 3. So let's rewrite this plugging in our variables. Every time you plug in a variable, use parentheses. 5 minus the square bracket parentheses, we have a 9 minus, and then we have inside parentheses here of a 4 plus a Q of 3. You make sure to close the inner parentheses and the larger square bracket parentheses around it. From here, I'm going to go ahead and do my parentheses first. I want to simplify the innermost parentheses. I go ahead and keep everything else. So I have 5 minus square bracket of 9 minus the inner parentheses is reading as 4 plus 3, which is 7. Once I had that value of 7, I'm going to go ahead and drop my parentheses because inside the parentheses gave me 7, but since I have one number, I'll go ahead and drop that parentheses. Parentheses are no longer needed if you have one number by itself. Now, I go ahead and solve my square bracket parentheses here. I keep the 5 and the subtraction outside of it. 9 minus 7 is going to come out to be a 2. And then I can drop the parentheses because I now just have one number written here inside my parentheses. So no parentheses needed when I simplify to one number. 5 minus 2 comes out to be 3. And that's going to be my final answer.